I was standing by the 14th floor coffee machine on a Tuesday morning in late September, adding oat milk to my third cup of coffee, when Stephen Patterson walked past me like I was invisible. Not just invisible, like I was part of the furniture he'd already decided to throw out. The CEO's son, 32 years old with a Stanford MBA his father paid $200,000 for, and enough arrogance to fill our entire 50-story building in downtown Chicago. He didn't say good morning, didn't acknowledge the 12 years, 2 months, and 14 days I'd given Patterson Industries, just breezed past in his perfectly tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, already barking orders into his iPhone about restructuring initiatives and optimization strategies. My hands were shaking slightly as I stirred my coffee, and I hated that they were shaking. I'd been feeling it for weeks now, this crawling sense that something bad was coming. Stephen had been at the company for 3 months, brought in by his father Richard as executive vice president of operations, and he'd been looking at me the way people look at old technology they're planning to replace, with that particular mixture of dismissal and impatience. I'm Judith Chen, 41 years old, single after a divorce 3 years ago that still stings when I think about it. No kids, just this job, this company I've poured everything into. 12 years ago, I walked into Patterson Industries fresh from a consulting firm, eager to prove myself, ready to build something meaningful. Back then, Patterson didn't even have a dedicated compliance officer. The CFO's assistant handled insurance renewals when she remembered. The legal department dealt with regulatory filings whenever they felt like it. It was a disaster waiting to explode. I built the compliance department from absolutely nothing, from a blank slate and a lot of late nights. Now we had 8 highly trained people, comprehensive risk management protocols I'd designed from scratch, and an audit preparation process that insurance companies across the industry actually praised. We'd never failed an audit under my watch, not once in 12 years. Perfect score every single time. I'd sacrificed for this company, weekends, holidays. I missed my niece's wedding because of an audit crisis, worked through my mother's illness because we were short-staffed, stayed late on my 40th birthday reviewing insurance policies alone in an empty office. This job was all I had left after my marriage fell apart, and I was good at it, really good at it. Judith, Stephen's voice cut through my thoughts like a knife. I turned to find him standing in the conference room doorway, looking at me with that expression of impatient dismissal that entitled people perfect over years of having everyone else accommodate their whims. My office. Now. Not good morning, not when you have a minute, not even basic professional courtesy, just a command like I was an intern who'd made a filing mistake. I set down my coffee mug, feeling my stomach tighten, and followed him down the wide hallway to the massive corner office that used to belong to David Chen, our chief financial officer, before Stephen decided 3 weeks into his tenure that he absolutely needed that particular space with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. David had been quietly relocated to a smaller interior office, understanding as we all did that fighting the CEO's son was a battle nobody could win. Stephen didn't sit down behind the enormous glass desk. He didn't offer me one of the expensive leather chairs, just stood there, still scrolling through something on his phone, making me wait like my time meant absolutely nothing. "I'm letting you go," he said finally, not even bothering to look up from his screen. "Effective immediately. We're moving in a completely new direction with compliance and risk management. Your approach is outdated and frankly inefficient. We need someone with fresh energy and innovative thinking." The words hit me like physical blows. I stood there completely frozen, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. 12 years. I'd given this company 12 years of my life, 70-hour weeks during audit season, nights and weekends, holidays. I'd built systems that protected millions in assets, saved the company from countless potential disasters, trained an entire team from scratch. And he was dismissing me like I was yesterday's newspaper, like I was a piece of furniture that didn't match his new office aesthetic. "Outdated," I heard myself say, and my voice sounded far away like someone else was speaking. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Our compliance rating is the highest in the entire industry. We've never failed a single audit. Our insurance premiums are 30% lower than industry average because of the risk management protocols I built." He finally looked up from his phone, and there was something genuinely cold in his eyes, something that told me this wasn't really a business decision. This was about power. This was personal in some way I didn't fully understand. "That's exactly the problem, Judith," he said, and I noticed he didn't use my title. Not director, not chief compliance officer, just my first name, deliberately stripping away any professional authority. "You're too focused on maintaining the status quo, on passing audits instead of innovating and disrupting the compliance space. We're bringing in new leadership. Someone younger who actually understands modern compliance frameworks and leverages technology, instead of relying on outdated manual processes." I wanted to laugh in his face, or cry, or scream, modern compliance, disrupting the compliance space, as if risk management was something you could disrupt like a ride-sharing app or a meal delivery service, as if you could innovate your way around federal regulations and insurance requirements that existed for very good reasons. "The Hartford insurance audit is in exactly 2 weeks, I said quietly, trying desperately to keep my voice level and professional even though I felt like I was drowning. "They're sending their full audit team. Jennifer Marks, Tom Brennan, Carol Wu. We've been preparing for 4 months. I've been coordinating everything." He waved his hand dismissively like he was shooing away an annoying insect. "I'm absolutely confident your team can handle it without you. You've documented all the procedures, correct? That's what you compliance people do, right? Document everything in your little binders, so I'm sure they'll be fine. Blake Morrison will be taking over as interim compliance director starting tomorrow. He comes from Deloitte, very impressive background." That's when I truly understood. He had absolutely no idea what I actually did. No comprehension whatsoever of the complexity of what was about to happen. No understanding that the insurance audit wasn't just about checking boxes on forms and filing papers in color-coded binders. He thought compliance was administrative work. He thought anyone could do it if they had the documentation and a consulting background. I smiled then, a small, professional, carefully controlled smile that gave absolutely nothing away. "Of course," I said, my voice steady now, "everything is thoroughly documented." What I didn't say, everything was documented, yes, but documentation doesn't replace 12 years of institutional knowledge. It doesn't replace relationships built over years with insurance auditors. It doesn't replace understanding the unwritten expectations and the complex interconnections between systems. It doesn't replace expertise. I walked back to my office and started packing my personal belongings in complete silence. 12 years of my professional life fit into exactly 3 cardboard boxes I got from the mailroom: my nameplate, my framed certifications from various compliance organizations, the coffee mug my team had given me last Christmas with "World's Best Compliance Officer" printed on it in cheerful letters, a photo of my mother from before she got sick, the small succulent plant Sarah had given me that I'd somehow managed to keep alive for 2 years. My team watched as I carefully packed everything, their faces showing a mixture of shock, barely concealed panic, and something that looked like fear. They understood what was happening. They understood what this meant. Sarah Martinez, my deputy director and the person I'd personally recruited and trained for the past 6 years, approached my desk very carefully, like she was approaching a wounded animal that might bolt. "Judith," she whispered, her voice barely audible, glancing around to make sure no one else could hear. "The audit, the Hartford team, the requirements, what are we supposed to?" "Stephen says you can handle it," I said, loud enough for anyone within earshot to hear clearly. I wanted witnesses. "He's absolutely confident the team can manage without me. I'm sure he's right." Her face went completely pale, all the color draining out in an instant, but she nodded silently, understanding that I couldn't say more. Not here, not now, she knew, they all knew. Every single person on my team understood exactly what was about to happen. I carried my 3 boxes to my car in the parking garage, feeling numb, got in, sat there for a long moment with my hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the concrete wall in front of me. Then I started crying. Big, ugly, shoulder-shaking sobs. 12 years, everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed, gone in a 5-minute meeting with a spoiled 32-year-old who didn't even understand what I did. I drove home to my apartment in Lincoln Park in a complete daze, barely seeing the road. When I finally got there, I sat down on my couch and just stared at nothing for what felt like hours. The sunlight moved across the floor, the shadows lengthened, my phone buzzed occasionally with concerned text messages from team members that I couldn't bring myself to answer. This was my life now, 41 years old, single, fired, with nothing to show for 12 years except cardboard boxes sitting in my trunk. Then at 6:47 p.m., my phone rang with a number I recognized immediately. Richard Patterson, the CEO, Stephen's father, the man who'd founded Patterson Industries 42 years ago and built it into a $3 billion corporation. Judith, his voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the edge of panic underneath. What the hell happened today? Your son fired me, I said flatly, too exhausted for diplomacy. He said my approach to compliance was outdated and inefficient. He said you were moving in a new direction. There was a long, heavy pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end. He didn't consult me about this decision, Richard said finally, and there was real anger in his voice now. Apparently he didn't feel he needed to. Another pause, longer this time. The Hartford insurance audit is in exactly 14 days. I'm aware. Judith, his voice softened slightly, took on that paternal tone he sometimes used with long-time employees. I know you're understandably upset about what happened today, but we absolutely need to talk about transition procedures, the audit process, the specific insurance company requirements, the relationships you've built with their team over the years. Richard, I interrupted him calmly, and something in my voice must have warned him. Did Stephen read my complete employment contract before he terminated me this morning? Complete silence. Did he? I pressed. I honestly don't know. Why? What does that have to do with? Because if he had bothered to actually read the contract, he would have seen the clause. Section 7.3, the one you personally insisted on including after the Williams disaster 8 years ago. I heard the sound of papers rustling frantically on his end. The Williams disaster. David Williams had been our compliance officer before me. He'd abruptly resigned without proper transition, taking all his institutional knowledge with him, and the company had nearly lost their entire insurance policy during an audit because nobody else understood the complex requirements. Richard had learned a very expensive lesson then about the importance of stability and knowledge retention in compliance roles. Jesus Christ, Richard breathed, and I could hear him reading now, understanding dawning. You're designated as the sole authorized representative for all insurance audit negotiations. That's absolutely correct, I said calmly, feeling oddly detached now. According to my employment contract, which you and I negotiated together 3 years ago after the Hartford scare, I am the sole authorized liaison with Hartford Insurance during the annual audit period. No other employee at Patterson Industries has the legal authority to negotiate terms, sign off on audit findings, or officially represent the company in any audit-related discussions or decisions. This can't be legally binding. Surely your team, Sarah or someone else with proper authority, could step in and… The contract isn't with Patterson Industries generically, Richard. The contract is with me personally. It was part of the very specific agreement you negotiated directly with Hartford Insurance 3 years ago after they threatened to completely drop our coverage following that compliance issue we had with the overseas subsidiary. Hartford wanted absolute stability. They wanted one single point of contact who thoroughly understood their increasingly complex requirements and could guarantee consistency. That designated point of contact is me, not my team, not Sarah. Not Blake Morrison from Deloitte, me. You can't just abandon the company right before a critical audit. I'm not abandoning anything, Richard, I said, and my voice was steady as steel now. Your son terminated my employment this morning. As of 5 p.m. today, I no longer work for Patterson Industries, which means in exactly 14 days, when the Hartford audit team shows up for their comprehensive annual review, there won't be anyone with the contractual legal authority to meet with them, negotiate with them, or sign off on their findings. That's not what happens if we proceed without an authorized representative. The audit fails automatically, I said, my voice factual and steady. Not because of performance issues, not because of compliance problems, but because there's no one with the contractual authority to complete it. Your entire insurance policy portfolio gets voided, all of it. General liability, professional liability, directors and officers insurance, errors and omissions, cyber liability, the works. $300 million in coverage gone instantly. And given the Riverside product liability lawsuit that's currently pending in federal court, with potential damages estimated at $200 million, you would be personally exposed to the full amount. The company would be exposed, every executive, every board member, personally liable. The Riverside lawsuit was an ongoing nightmare that kept our legal department up at night. A customer had been seriously injured using one of our specialized manufacturing components in a major construction project. The legal case was complex, expensive, and deeply unpleasant. Without insurance coverage, it could literally bankrupt Patterson Industries and destroy everything Richard had built over 4 decades. Richard was completely silent for a very long moment. I could almost hear him thinking, calculating, realizing the full scope of what his son had done without understanding the consequences. "I'll call you back," he said abruptly and hung up without saying goodbye. I sat back against my couch cushions and allowed myself a small, grim smile. I wasn't being vindictive. I wasn't being petty. I was simply being accurate and factual. The contract was crystal clear. Stephen had made an impulsive decision without understanding the consequences or doing even basic due diligence. Now those consequences were about to become devastatingly real for everyone involved. Exactly 63 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was Stephen himself. His number showed up on my caller ID and I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "We need you to come back to the office immediately," he said, his voice tight and controlled but missing all of his earlier arrogance. No apology, no acknowledgement of his mistake, no recognition of what he'd done. "There's been a significant misunderstanding about your role and responsibilities." "Has there?" I said mildly, examining my fingernails. "The audit situation with Hartford Insurance. We weren't fully aware that you had that specific contractual clause in your employment agreement. Obviously, we need to sort this out immediately and discuss transition procedures." "Obviously. So you'll come in first thing tomorrow morning at 8, and we can discuss the proper transition plan and—" "No," I said simply and calmly. Complete silence. I could practically hear his brain short-circuiting, unable to process that someone was telling him no. "What do you mean no?" His voice rose sharply, the arrogance creeping back. "This is a crisis situation. The company desperately needs you." "The company fired me this morning for being outdated and inefficient," I replied, keeping my voice pleasant and even. "I'm absolutely certain your fresh, innovative approach to compliance and risk management will handle the situation beautifully. You said Blake Morrison has a very impressive background. I'm sure he'll figure it out." "Don't be ridiculous, we both know that." "Stephen," I interrupted him firmly, "I don't work for you anymore. You made that extraordinarily clear this morning when you dismissed 12 years of expertise without even basic professional courtesy. You didn't ask questions. You didn't review my contract. You didn't consult your father. You just decided I was disposable. Now if you'll excuse me, I have other things to do." I hung up and immediately turned off my phone. 14 minutes later, Richard called my home landline, the number I rarely give out and keep mostly for emergencies. "Judith," he said, his voice careful and measured, "please, let's be reasonable adults about this situation." "I'm being perfectly reasonable, Richard. Your son made what he thought was a sound business decision. Now you're both dealing with the consequences of that decision." "What do you want? Just tell me what you want and let's work this out." I closed my eyes, thinking about everything I'd given this company, everything I'd sacrificed, the weekends, the holidays, the relationships I'd neglected, the personal life I'd put on hold, all for a job that had just thrown me away like garbage. "I want to not work for someone who thinks 12 years of specialized expertise is outdated," I said clearly. "I want to not work for someone who fires dedicated employees without doing even the most basic due diligence on their contracts or understanding their actual value to the organization. I'll talk to Stephen personally. He made a serious mistake. He's young and he's learning. He'll understand that now." "That's between you and your son, Richard. I can't fix your family dynamics." "Judith," his voice hardened, took on the tone he used in difficult board negotiations. "The audit is in 12 days. If you don't come back, this company could be completely destroyed. Hundreds of jobs will be lost. Your entire team, Sarah with her 2 kids in elementary school, Tom supporting his elderly parents, Jennifer who just bought her first house, everyone you've worked with and mentored for years, all of them gone." I closed my eyes. He was absolutely right about that part and he knew it. It wasn't just about me or Stephen or corporate politics or hurt feelings. There were genuinely good people at Patterson Industries. People who had worked hard, who had families, who had nothing to do with this mess. People who didn't deserve to lose their livelihoods because the CEO's son was an arrogant fool. I'll come back, I said finally, after a long silence that stretched between us, but only under very specific conditions that are completely non-negotiable. Name them, whatever you want. First, I want everything in formal writing with full legal review, a completely new employment contract, Chief Compliance Officer as my official title, reporting directly to you and only you, not to Stephen or anyone else in his chain of command. Second, I want full operational autonomy over my entire department with zero interference from anyone. I make the decisions, I hire, I fire, I set protocols. Third, Stephen is not involved in any compliance matters whatsoever. Not now, not ever. He doesn't attend our meetings. He doesn't review our work. He doesn't speak to my team. He has absolutely no authority over my department in any capacity. And fourth, I want a public acknowledgement to the entire company that I was wrongly terminated. An email from you to all staff explaining that there was an error in judgment. Done, Richard said without even a second of hesitation. I'll have our legal department draft the contract tonight. You'll have it for review by tomorrow afternoon. One more thing, I added. I want to know about this Blake Morrison, the person Stephen hired to replace me. What's his actual background? There was a brief pause. Blake Morrison, 28 years old, very enthusiastic young man with an impressive consulting background at Deloitte, strong analytical skills, MBA from Northwestern. Actual compliance experience, certifications, years working in risk management. Another pause. He's a remarkably quick learner with excellent problem-solving abilities. I almost laughed out loud. A quick learner. They were planning to navigate a Hartford Insurance comprehensive compliance audit, one of the most complex and rigorous processes in our industry, with an enthusiastic quick learner from Deloitte who had good problem-solving abilities. Tell Blake he can shadow me throughout the entire audit process, I said. Maybe he'll actually learn what compliance really means in practice versus theory. The next morning I walked into Patterson Industries at exactly 8:30 a.m. like absolutely nothing had happened, like I hadn't been fired yesterday, like I hadn't spent last night crying and then planning my revenge. The receptionist in the main lobby did an actual double take when she saw me walking through the doors. Her mouth literally fell open. So did every single person I passed in the halls on my way to the 14th floor. News travels faster than light in corporate office environments, and everyone had heard about my firing by noon yesterday. Sarah Martinez practically sprinted across the open office space to meet me, her relief visible on her face. "Thank God you're back," she said, her voice emotional and barely controlled. "Just for the audit," I said carefully, not wanting to reveal everything yet about my new contract and expanded role. Not entirely true, but I wasn't ready to make a big announcement. Not yet. Stephen was conspicuously nowhere to be seen in the office. I learned later through the office grapevine that Richard had very deliberately sent him on an emergency trip to our West Coast regional office in San Francisco, getting him completely out of the way during this delicate transition period. Smart move. Blake Morrison was waiting in what used to be my office, sitting nervously in what used to be my chair. He was 28 years old, wearing an expensive charcoal grey suit that looked brand new with the price tags probably cut off that morning, and sporting an eager, hopeful smile that made him look even younger than his years. He stood up quickly when I entered, nearly knocking over a stack of papers. "Ms. Chen, I'm Blake Morrison. I'm so incredibly excited to learn from you. I've heard absolutely amazing things about the compliance program you've built here, the systems you've designed. It's really impressive work. World-class, really." I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. He seemed like a genuinely nice kid who'd been thrown into a situation way over his head, used as a pawn in Stephen's power play without fully understanding what he was getting into. "Have you reviewed the Hartford Insurance audit requirements?" I asked directly, setting down my bag and getting straight to business. His eager smile faltered slightly. "I've started going through the materials. There's quite a lot of documentation, more than I initially expected." 842 pages in the primary audit framework, I said, watching his face, plus 216 pages of technical appendices, plus our internal documentation which runs about 300 pages, plus 3 full years of detailed correspondence with Hartford establishing our specific protocols, procedures, and expectations. Have you contacted anyone at Hartford Insurance to introduce yourself as the new director? I thought I should probably wait until after you showed me how everything works, he said, and I had to give him credit for that instinct at least. Very good thinking, I said, and I meant it sincerely. Because Hartford Insurance doesn't know you exist, and if you had contacted them directly claiming to be the new compliance director without proper authorization and introduction through established channels, they would have immediately flagged it as an unauthorized change in designated personnel and potentially voided the entire audit before it even started. His face went completely pale. I had absolutely no idea it worked like that. That's the fundamental problem with compliance work, I said, not unkindly. You don't know what you don't know, and in this particular field, what you don't know can literally destroy a $3 billion company in a matter of days. Over the next 8 days, I walked Blake Morrison through the absolute basics of insurance compliance auditing. He was actually reasonably intelligent, and he genuinely tried hard to absorb everything I was teaching him. But compliance wasn't something you could learn in a week or even a month. It wasn't even something you could fully learn in a year. It was institutional knowledge, built gradually over time through experience, understanding not just the written rules but the relationships, the history, the context, the unwritten expectations that come from years of working with the same auditors. The audit officially began on a Monday morning at precisely 9:00 a.m. 3 Hartford Insurance representatives arrived in our main conference room on the 14th floor. Jennifer Marks, their senior auditor who I'd worked with for 7 years, Tom Brennan, their specialized risk assessment expert, and Carol Wu, their legal compliance specialist. I had strong professional relationships with all of them built over years of consistent, reliable, excellent work. Judith, Jennifer smiled genuinely when she saw me waiting in the conference room. So good to see you. We'd heard some concerning rumors through our network that you'd left the company. Temporary administrative misunderstanding, I said smoothly, keeping my tone professional and pleasant. All completely resolved now. I'm back and fully engaged. Thank God for that, Tom said, and he sounded genuinely relieved. No offense intended to your successor here. He nodded politely at Blake, who was standing nervously by the wall, but we were honestly quite nervous about conducting this comprehensive audit with someone completely new who didn't understand our specific requirements and established protocols. Blake is here to observe the entire process and learn, I said clearly, establishing the hierarchy. I'll be personally handling everything directly as always. During the first scheduled break, Carol Wu pulled me aside into a quiet corner of the hallway, away from everyone else. Off the record, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, we were fully prepared to recommend immediate suspension of coverage if you weren't personally here to conduct this audit. Really? I raised my eyebrows, genuinely surprised by how close we'd come to disaster. She nodded seriously. Your protocols and systems are excellent, Judith, among the absolute best we see in the entire industry, but they're also highly complex and interconnected. We need someone who thoroughly understands them from the inside, someone who built them, someone we've built real trust with over years of working together. That person is you, not a replacement, no matter how qualified they might be on paper. The audit process took exactly 3 full days. It was intensive, detailed, mentally exhausting, and required constant attention to minute technical details. Blake shadowed me through most of it, taking extensive notes, asking occasional intelligent questions. I could see him gradually beginning to understand the actual scope and complexity of what he'd stepped into so confidently. On the 3rd day, late in the afternoon, Jennifer Marks signed off on the final audit report with a flourish of her pen. Perfect score, she announced, smiling warmly at me. 12 years in a row, Judith. That's an actual record for us in this entire region. We've never had another client maintain this level of consistent compliance for this long. Richard Patterson had made a point of appearing for the final sign-off session, looking visibly relieved when he heard the results. Excellent work, Judith, he said, and there was genuine gratitude in his voice. Truly excellent. Just doing my job, I said simply, the job I've been doing for 12 years. That evening, after everyone else had left for the day, Richard asked me to stay late. We sat in his massive office with its panoramic view of the Chicago skyline turning orange and pink in the sunset. I owe you a sincere apology, he said, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. What Stephen did was completely unacceptable. I should have been paying much closer attention to his decisions and his judgment. Yes, I said simply, not letting him off the hook easily. I've had several very serious conversations with him over the past week. He understands now that he made a catastrophic mistake. He's young. He has a lot to learn about leadership and about understanding what real expertise looks like. I waited, saying nothing, letting the silence stretch. I want you to stay on permanently as Chief Compliance Officer, he continued. The new contract is ready for your signature with all the terms we discussed, and, he hesitated, which was unusual for Richard, who was normally supremely confident. I'm moving Stephen to a strategic planning role focused on long-term initiatives and business development. He won't have any operational authority anymore. He won't be making decisions that affect day-to-day operations or personnel. What about Blake Morrison? I asked. Blake is a good kid with real potential, but he's clearly not ready for this level of responsibility and complexity. I'm going to offer him a junior analyst position in your department if you're willing to mentor him properly and bring him along gradually. I thought about it carefully. Blake hadn't been malicious or deliberately harmful. He'd just been completely in over his head, used as a pawn in Stephen's power play. I'll take him on, I said finally, but only if he clearly understands that he's starting from the very bottom of the department. No shortcuts, no special treatment because of how he was brought in. He earns everything. Richard nodded, looking relieved. That's more than fair, thank you. I thought that was the end of everything, that we could move forward professionally, focus on work, put this ugliness behind us. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, strange things started happening. Small things at first, easy to dismiss as random technical glitches or honest mistakes that happen in large organizations. First, my access to certain shared files on our network was mysteriously revoked without any explanation. When I contacted it to ask why, they said they had no record of who had changed the permissions or why. Then an important email I'd sent about updated audit procedures was mysteriously deleted from the company server, not just from my sent folder, but from all the recipients' inboxes too, gone completely like it had never existed. A detailed report I'd carefully prepared for the board of directors was altered before it reached them. Someone had changed key numbers and dates, making it look like I'd made serious factual errors in my analysis. When I went to check the original file to prove what I'd actually written, it had been deleted from the system entirely. Then my team members started getting pulled into mysterious meetings I knew absolutely nothing about. Sarah came to me one afternoon, looking visibly uncomfortable and worried. Marcus has been asking very specific questions about the audit process, she said quietly, glancing around nervously to make sure no one could overhear us. Specifically about the Hartford relationship and how we've structured the authorized representative clause. He wanted to know if there were any legal vulnerabilities in how we set things up. I went very still, my entire body tensing. What exactly did you tell him? Nothing at all. I said he'd have to ask you directly if he wanted information about contractual arrangements. But Judith, she lowered her voice even more, I think he's actively trying to find ways to undermine you, to make you look incompetent or unreliable so he can justify firing you again. I should have seen it coming earlier. Stephen had been publicly humiliated by his own father. His operational power had been stripped away, and I was the direct cause of his downfall. Of course he would want some form of revenge. That's what entitled people who have never faced real consequences do when they're finally held accountable. The attacks became more sophisticated and coordinated over the following weeks. Emails appeared to come from my address but contained obviously incorrect information, sent to key stakeholders and important clients. Calendar invitations were mysteriously changed at the last minute, making me miss critical meetings and look unprofessional and disorganized. Expense reports I'd submitted were suddenly flagged for supposed irregularities I knew I hadn't made. Small, calculated acts of sabotage, specifically designed to make me look incompetent, unreliable, unprofessional. Death by 1,000 cuts. I started documenting absolutely everything. Screenshots of every suspicious email with full headers showing metadata, detailed logs of every technical issue with exact timestamps, time-stamped records of every meeting I was suddenly excluded from without explanation. I forwarded copies of everything to my personal email account as backup. I built an airtight case, because I'd been working in compliance and risk management for 12 years, and I knew exactly how to document evidence that would hold up under intense scrutiny. Then came the biggest, most serious attack. An official complaint was filed with Human Resources, anonymous, of course, as these things always are, claiming that I had verbally abused Blake Morrison in front of other staff members, created a hostile and threatening work environment, and made discriminatory comments about his age and lack of experience. It was completely, entirely fabricated. Every single word was a malicious lie designed to destroy my reputation and career. Blake Morrison himself came to my office within an hour of hearing about the complaint, looking genuinely distressed and upset. "I didn't file that complaint," he said immediately, his voice urgent and sincere. "I would never do that. You've been nothing but professional and helpful to me. You've been an amazing mentor. I don't know who did this, but it absolutely wasn't me." "I know," I said calmly, because I did know. I knew exactly who had done it and why. "What can I do? I'll make a formal statement to HR. I'll tell them this is completely false and fabricated." "Do that," I said. "Document everything in writing, but Blake, be very careful. Whoever is doing this is playing a dangerous game and they might come after you next." The formal HR investigation was launched immediately, which is standard procedure for any complaint involving harassment or discrimination allegations. I was placed on administrative leave pending the outcome, sitting at home while my career was systematically dismantled. But I'd built my case carefully. I compiled everything I'd collected into a comprehensive report with evidence, every screenshot, every log entry, every timeline. The pattern was crystal clear to anyone who knew what to look for. I sent the complete package directly to Richard Patterson, bypassing HR entirely. He called exactly 2 days later. "Come to the office tomorrow, 9 a.m, conference room, this is important." When I arrived, external forensic investigators were waiting, the kind you bring for serious corporate misconduct. "Ms. Chen," the lead investigator said, "we've reviewed your documentation. We'd like to show you what we found." They pulled up computer logs, digital footprints. Stephen had been sloppy. The hostile work environment complaint had been filed from his office computer. The altered report changed using his executive access. "We also found something else," the investigator said. "Stephen had been communicating with Blake Morrison before you returned, emails discussing how to transition you out once the audit was complete." Richard stood. "Thank you," he told the investigators. Then to me, "Judith, I'm sorry, Stephen is done here. I'm asking him to resign. This level of misconduct, I can't overlook it, even for my son." 2 days later, Stephen was gone. Blake left too, more gracefully. "I didn't know what I was getting into," he said honestly. "I'm sorry." "You're young," I said. "You'll learn. Remember, integrity matters more than opportunity." The board meeting was Monday. Richard introduced me as Executive Vice President of Risk Management. "Thank you," I said. "I accept. I'll continue doing what I've always done. Protect this company, build strong systems, speak truth." That evening I sat in my new corner office, the one Stephen had taken. Sarah knocked. "Thank you for coming back, for fighting, for showing us what it looks like to stand up for yourself professionally." "I didn't do anything heroic," I said. "I just knew my value and refused to be treated like I didn't matter." "That's exactly what made it heroic." After she left, I thought about everything. Stephen had fired me thinking I was replaceable. He learned the hard way that some things require time, patience, expertise built over years. I didn't celebrate his downfall, but I felt validation. For 12 years I'd shown up, done the work, and when it mattered most, that foundation held. Not because I was young or innovative, but because I was thorough, knowledgeable, professional. That felt like a quiet victory. 3 months later, Patterson Industries announced record profits and successful resolution of the Riverside lawsuit. Stephen never came back. Last I heard, he was at a startup in Silicon Valley, not my concern anymore. My concern was building the best compliance program in the industry, mentoring the next generation, leaving something sustainable. Because that's what expertise is, not just knowing what to do but understanding why it matters, and being willing to fight for it. I wasn't outdated, I was experienced. And there's a world of difference.